China carries out its second day of military exercises simulating a blockade of Taiwan. How is the country responding? The world braces for Donald Trump's latest tariff plan, with many asking if Taiwan's main export, semiconductors, will get hit. And a vigil on the 4th anniversary of Taiwan's deadliest train crash that killed 49 people. Plus, villagers from Taiwan's Hakka minority celebrate the life of a man who saved their cultural treasures. Good evening, welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Joyce Tseng. Taiwan's military says dozens of Chinese military aircraft and naval ships have been operating around the country, with China conducting live-fire drills in the region. It comes as Beijing continues with a second day of simulated blockade exercises. Hamio Khan has more.
Soldiers on China's east coast rush to launch missiles. And in the seas around Taiwan, Chinese Navy ships patrol. This is the second day of large-scale military exercises announced by Beijing, with new drills called Strait Thunder-2025A, practicing using live ammunition to simulate precision strikes on Taiwan and the East China Sea. Here in Taipei, officials are on alert as they say the drills are also practicing how to surround and blockade the country. On Wednesday, Taiwan's Defense Ministry reported 27 Chinese military aircraft and 21 naval ships in the region. Intelligence officials say that China's Shandong carrier got closer to Taiwan and that they are monitoring the situation for anything unusual.
昨天的位置是220海里，今天是190海里，因为船是会动，所以它在我们周边，不管它的距离多远，其实对我们来讲都是一个值得深入关切的一个重要的共军的一个动态。
But one of the most notable parts of the drills is the use of a new name. Previously, Chinese officials said large-scale drills would be a new normal and did need a label. Previous drills have been under the name Joint Sword, but Taiwan's Defense Ministry says whatever the name, there's no disguising the intent behind the drills.
最重要的一个部分是我们看它军演的性质是什么，不管这样的一个名称是什么样的名称，我们认为都没有办法去掩盖以赤裸裸的这种军演 挑衅跟威胁台湾人民的一种心态。
With the increase in military activity and the diverse set of names, China seems to be conducting more comprehensive types of drills. This is a trend that's growing more concerning as China doubles down on threats to take Taiwan by force.
I mean, I think it's definitely getting much more in the rehearsal phase than it was in the past. So it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the Taiwanese armed forces, but I think it's going to send some pretty big shockwaves throughout, the Taiwanese Minister of National Defense and the RC forces about how do they respond.
Taiwan's military says it has mobilized units across the country and is conducting its own exercises to see how quickly it can respond to the variety of threats posed by China. This is the fourth large-scale military exercise from China in less than 12 months. And here at the Defense Ministry, officials say that they expect more exercises like this, but that they're taking it as an opportunity to learn about China's capabilities and further boost their own defenses. Fu Hahong and Jaime Okan in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
As China's drills continue into the second day, to discuss more what message China is sending, Adil Brar spoke to Ping-Kui Chen, a professor at National Tsinghua University in Taipei.
What's the signal China is sending to Taiwan with these exercises?
It's the signal that China always tries to send. It's the resolve to use force to take Taiwan if Taiwan try to declare independence or something else that China would not accept. But I think this time, the signal is not only sending to Taipei, but also Washington. I think this is a signal that try to warn Washington that China would not abandon using force against Taiwan if Taiwan is heading to a direction that China doesn't want. We know that the Trump administration hasn't had a chance to talk about Taiwan issue with Beijing. So this might be a signal that Beijing tried to send in advance.
China's military says it's practicing a blockade of Taiwan with these exercises. What's your take on that?
I would say this might be a practice for future blockade, but on the scale of the exercise, we cannot say this is a exercise of blockade. If you want to do the blockade of Taiwan, you definitely need more forces. This is, I would say, not a very large-scale exercise compared to last year or the year before. So, to some extent, this might be a good news that China is not increasing its military threat to a significant level.
How is Taiwan responding to China's military drills?
So Taiwan is preparing its own regular exercise. So we have annual Hangguan exercise. They will conduct the computer exercise in the next few days and the live fire exercise in July. And this year, they will conduct city battle exercise as well. And there is an exercise to practice the social mobilization, to practice how fast that we can mobilize the resources within the society. So I would say the situation is that Taiwan is getting more and more prepared for an incoming conflict in case of Chinese invasion. This is a response that Taiwan had to do facing China's military threat.
That was Ping-Hui Chen from National Tseng University in Taipei. U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called Liberation Day is hours away, a day when he has pledged to reveal sweeping global tariffs. Some markets have already been falling because of the uncertainty. A slight rise in Taiwan's markets in the final hours ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement of fresh, long-threatened tariffs. It's an exception, as other stocks in Asia continue to slide over fears the U.S. policy could plunge the economy into a downturn. Taking a longer view, Taiwan's most valuable stock, chipmaker TSMC, has fallen almost 16% since Trump took office in January. Trump is set to make what he says will be his biggest trade move yet, this time reciprocal tariffs, a sort of tax price match expected to apply to all countries. Those foreseen to be hit the hardest, a group of nations Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has dubbed the Dirty 15, a list believed to be of countries with the biggest trade imbalances with the U.S., which would include Taiwan. Without more details, Taipei says it cannot be sure it will get hit with the levies, but it's devised a working group of officials to prepare for the worst.
这个经贸小组呢，由行政院在负责。譬如说如果加10%，那我们应该怎么做？如果加25%，我们会怎么做？所以所有的情境我们都经过这个分析推估，那么找出因应的方法。
Since taking office 2 months ago, Trump has already imposed tariffs on critical metals, a blanket tariff on all Chinese shipments, and goods from Canada and Mexico not covered by a 2020 deal. Just last week, Trump added a tariff on all foreign cars and related parts. As for what's to come,
if it's simply reciprocal, maybe the response won't be so bad. If it's a blanket across-the-board tariff announcement where every country, regardless of whether you're a partner, an ally, or a free trade partner of the United States, if everyone's getting 20%, then that's really complicated for everyone.
Trump has said the goal is to revive American production and stop other countries from, quote, ripping off the United States.
Take a look at trade with Asia. I wouldn't say anybody is treated as fairly or nicely.
Recently, Washington has kept Taiwan on its foreign trade barriers list, highlighting blocks to U.S. meat and cars into the country. On top of that, Trump has also long threatened separate tariffs on imported chips, Taiwan's most valuable sector, a tax that would go beyond simply reciprocating tariffs.
Taiwan does have some high tariff rates, actually some very high tariff rates on particularly agriculture products. And you have products like, semiconductors and a lot of ICT products, which essentially go tariff-free these days. It's already one of the most free trade, fair trade industries in the world. And so they're about to get hit with a very unfair tax.
As Taiwan braces for Trump's announcement, other countries are already standing ready to respond. Europe saying it will take strong measures if it must. But for now, all there is to do is wait and see what the U.S. president has in store. Justin Wu and Joyce Tseng for TaiwanPlus. Some economists are already warning U.S. tariffs could damage global trade. For more on what this could mean for markets in Asia, earlier I spoke more with Riley Walters, who you just heard from. Walters is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. Of course, a lot of speculation as to what exactly Trump's tariffs will be. He's also called out trade with Asia, saying it's not done fairly. How are you expecting U.S. allies and partners in this region to respond?
I suspect that a lot of people might wait and see for perhaps the Canadian-Mexico response, perhaps the European response, which is probably going to be a little bit more hawkish. Countries like Japan and South Korea and Taiwan, I don't think they're going to necessarily want to get ahead of these other countries with announcements of reciprocal tariffs if they want to hit back. I think some countries do want to reduce their tariffs. They do want to have a good working relationship with this administration. India, for example, has announced it will reduce its tariffs. The problem is, are they going to get an exemption tomorrow or not? I'm skeptical. And this really then pulls in the question, why should we even negotiate then if we're going to get tariffs anyway?
For Taiwan specifically, what do you think Taipei needs to be prepared to do in response to these tariffs?
It really is much more difficult for an economy, for a government like Taiwan, because its two main trade and economic partners are really the US and China. Domestic competition in China is just unfair to foreign enterprise. And that includes Taiwanese companies now. Then what do you do with the United States when you have a government that is less interested in bringing in foreign trade? They want foreign investment, sure. TSMC, great. MediaTek, great. But what about the hundreds of other small and medium enterprises that simply cannot put that kind of manufacturing or investment into the United States? Really what the government in Taiwan is going to have to start preparing for is a lot of domestic challenges, which come from their companies losing the ability or losing profits from reduction of exports to the United States.
That was Riley Walters, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. With uncertainty running high ahead of Trump's tariff announcement, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has vowed to stand firm.
Australia's exports to the United States represent about under 5% of our goods exports. Okay, so let's have some perspective here about standing up for Australia's national interest.
Albanese was speaking on the campaign trail with elections just 4 weeks away. He says he won't budge on the country's biosecurity laws, pharmaceuticals, or the law allowing media outlets to push for fair compensation for their content. These three areas were raised in a recent U.S. report as barriers to trade. This is Albanese's second showdown with the Trump administration on tariffs after it imposed levies on Australia's steel and aluminum earlier this year. Taiwan is marking 4 years since its deadliest railway accident. On April 2, 2021, a Taroko Express train hit a construction truck on the line on Taiwan's east coast. The train derailed, killing 49 people on board. Another 216 were injured. A court found several parties responsible, including a railway engineer and a contractor. Most were given prison sentences in order to pay compensation to victims' families. Taiwan Railway Corporation says it will set up memorial lights at the tunnel where the crash took place to light up each year around the anniversary. Coming up after the break. Rescue teams in Myanmar and Thailand continue to search for survivors from last week's earthquake as fears of a humanitarian crisis loom. Stay with us.
For more news from Taiwan and around the world, download our app or check out the TaiwanPlus website. Ready? Go.
Ready.
Just jump.
Okay, jump!
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The search for survivors is continuing in Myanmar 5 days after a magnitude 7.7 earthquake hit the second largest city of Mandalay. But hopes of finding people alive are dwindling, and attention is now turning to what is fast becoming a dire humanitarian situation. Rosie Greninger reports.
Myanmar's military rulers hold a minute of silence for the victims of last week's powerful magnitude 7.7 earthquake, as hopes of finding survivors fades. 5 days on from the disaster, the death toll continues to rise. Rescue workers continue to search through the rubble for any signs of life. In the worst hit areas of Myanmar's second largest city, Mandalay, entire communities have been flattened, and there is significant damage to roads, bridges and other infrastructure. Against the odds, a miraculous rescue. A 63-year-old woman pulled alive from a partially collapsed building in Naypyidaw, 91 hours after the earthquake struck. Beyond the immediate impacts, the United Nations says the earthquake has compounded an already dire crisis in Myanmar, which is in the midst of a 4-year civil war. Reports suggest the country's military leaders are still carrying out airstrikes against pro-democracy rebel groups and blocking aid deliveries. With hospitals overwhelmed with the injured, multiple aid agencies are seriously concerned about the lack of access to essentials.
The immediate needs of the affected communities, as in any, I would say, earthquake, are becoming increasingly urgent. You have shelter, the foods, the clean water, essential household items are all in a short supply. Some people in the affected areas spent the night in the open, and some of us as well, together with the humanitarian actors, because you have no electricity, you have no running water.
Strong aftershocks are making the situation worse. Humanitarian agencies are urgently pressing for more aid funding.
Now, very quickly, we need to upscale. So we can only do that with funding. And ideally, we get funding for our previous operations and this additional requirement. Without that, we will struggle.
In neighbouring Thailand, also impacted by the quake, the death toll has risen to 21 people. Workers are still looking for survivors in the rubble of a collapsed building that was under construction, where 70 people are believed to be trapped.
ตอนนี้ยังไม่มีสัญญาณชีพนะครับที่พบนี่ก็มีร่างอยู่ผมว่าน่าจะ12ร่างที่อยู่ด้านในนะแต่ยังไม่ได้ออกมาเพราะว่าการเอาร่างออกมายังถือว่าไม่ใช่เรื่องสำคัญที่สุดตอนนี้นะแต่อันไหนที่พอออกมาได้เราก็เอาออกมาอย่างร่างเมื่อกี้นะครับที่เสียชีวิตก็ออกมาก่อนแต่ว่าถ้าอันไหนที่ลึกแล้วมีสิ่งทับอยู่เนี่ยเราก็ถือว่าขอหาผู้รอดชีวิตก่อน
The city has ended its disaster zone declaration. Unlike Myanmar, where it's clear the impacts of the quake will be long-lasting. James Lin and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
With entry to Myanmar tightly controlled by the military junta, Taiwan is still looking for ways to help. They say the people of Myanmar need it more than ever. Tiffany Wong reports.
Taiwan can help. That's the message that Taiwan is sending to Myanmar after a magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck the Southeast Asian country on March 28th, killing thousands of people and destroying whole communities. Now Taiwan is calling for donations to help those in need. And nearly a week after the quake, they say they have finally found a way to get help into the country's tightly controlled borders.
他们真的需要帮忙，而且这个帮忙的过程不是你想要就帮忙得到，我们必须要想尽各种各样的方法，才能把我们的爱心真的送进去。所以，请各位媒体朋友不要问我们怎么送，因为我们的管道一旦曝光，我们就是会被封锁。各位都知道为什么，我都不用多说，谁会封锁台湾？
Myanmar has close ties with China, which funds many of its infrastructure projects. And the military junta that currently occupies the government did not respond to Taiwan's early offer of a standby rescue team. Students from Myanmar also urged Taiwan to help their families back home.
这些增援被很多因素被阻挡。我们老实说的好，就是地震是不分国界的。更希望各个国家的人 来帮助缅甸，来帮助这些受到这个地震灾难的人们。
Taiwanese business people in Myanmar say they can use their connections in the country to get aid to those who need it.
所以这物资在目前严重的欠缺是在手电筒、帐篷、毛毯、急救包、食品、饮用水，包括丝带、床垫、蚊帐。台商会已经准备了在生产第2批 的物资已经在集中，预计在3天后又马上再送往灾区。
Despite the challenges, the Taiwanese community says they are determined to get aid to those in Myanmar. Hank Shi and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A historic town in southern Taiwan is remembering the man who saved its cultural treasures almost a year after his death. What started as a one-person campaign has become a movement that's echoed through the region. John Van Trieste has this report.
The lotus blossoms are back as southern Taiwan's gentle winter gives way to the warmth of spring. They've been blooming in this same pond year after year for more than a century. Here at the old Yang family residence in Jiadong, Pingdong County, not much has changed since the 1920s. The feng shui pond still runs with water, intricate stone carvings still adorn the walls, and the complex decorations on the roof, from flowers to elephant heads, show no signs of weathering. It's all lovingly preserved for tour groups to enjoy. But were it not for one man, these fine views would all have fallen into ruin years ago. Tseng was a doctor, but it's his poetry and his defense of local culture that people best remember him for. It started with a Yang family residence. In 1995, plans to build a road through part of the grounds stirred local resistance. But the protests failed to achieve much. That's when Tseng Guihai stepped in, and what he did set off a chain reaction. Jiadong is one of the towns in this part of southern Taiwan with a big population of Hakka people. These are people with Chinese origins, but with their own distinct language, history, and way of life. Tseng turned saving this one home, the Yang family residence, into a Hakka cause. Groups from out of town joined in. At first, the protests were something of a confusing novelty in this small town.
我记得很多妇女就是老人家就依着那个门边，也好奇到底发生什么事情，因为整个嘉东村大概没有这样办过。
But the pressure campaign worked. The planned road was rerouted, and the building and grounds are still here. More than that, people began to appreciate a local heritage they'd come to overlook. So when the next battle to save an old building came in 2011, people were primed to take action. After 100 years, the two-story shop and home that local people call Zhang's house was collapsing. And with the property being used as bank collateral, repairs were impossible. With a vigorous fundraising campaign, though, Tseng was able to change the right minds. Today, the building looks freshly restored. At the time, Tseng spoke to Taiwan's Hakka TV about his thinking. Zheng Guihai died on the 6th of August, 2024. But he left behind not just verse like this, but a town he'd taught to take pride in itself as a living museum. Others have now taken up the baton. Now, within 1 kilometer, visitors can find 5 carefully protected historic sites. And nearby, an old streetscape has been turned into a cultural space named Poet's Walk in Zheng's honor. In Zhang's house, the building he campaigned for, a small exhibit on Zheng's life runs till June, a reminder of a person who changed his community. Ethan Pan and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, we leave you with images of Thailand's search and rescue dogs offering emotional support to the relatives of victims of the recent earthquake. I'm Joyce. Take care. Have a good evening.